Well, the institution of the coffee house is really kind of amazing, and especially in the way it differs from the tavern or the pub. They were places just alive with conversation, and they were first they exploded in London. I mean, there was one coffee house for every 200 Londoners. That's an astonishing number of coffee
That would be
houses.
amazing.
And they all had a different identity. There was a place you went if you were a scientist, where you would hang out, or if you were a writer, you went to another place, and if you were in business. And the stock exchange, the London Stock Exchange, begins in a coffee house, and people were trading, and so does Lloyd's of London begins at Lloyd's Coffee House. If you wanted to take out a policy, an insurance policy on your shipment or your ship, um, and then there were places where lots of political conversation got started. In fact, they were so threatening to Charles II that he tried to close them down. He thought that they were hotbeds of insurrection, and indeed in France they became that. The storming of the Bastille, that mob did not form in a tavern; it formed in a coffee house. It was very sober, but stimulated, and so there's a quality to the social interaction of different drugs, and MDMA is another. Obviously, is a very specific kind of interaction.
But that kind of interaction, which is often argumentative, discussive,
Mm-hmm.
uh, that is going to foment a greater communication between people of ideas and cross-pollination of ideas, a bit like the way the internet suddenly made all sorts of ideas that could jump very quickly from one place to another. And so it's kind of fascinating to see that as integral to the Industrial Revolution, into the kind of
Yeah.
ways in which people were rethinking the world. And it gave them, they were kind of little magazines. The other thing about them is that they were only for
Well, the
men.
magazine began in a coffee house. Was it the Idler? I forget what the
The
first
Tatler, I
magazine was.
think. The
The
Tatler, I
Tatler, yeah,
think.
and it was an attempt to put coffee house culture between in pages, and it was organized like the different coffee houses. So I
And
agree.
that's
What
exactly what a magazine used to be, right? That's what it's a bunch of people who kind of have similar sensibility, or but nonetheless have enough difference that the
Yeah,
conversation can be interesting.
it's a
And
community of interest that is willing to take in new information and new ideas, and that's what the coffee houses were. They were living magazines, and what's curious to me is why don't we have that now in coffee houses? They're utterly silent places where people have headphones on and they're working on the proposal for their startup, on a laptop, and never talking to one another. So we've kind of drained that the culture from the coffee house.
because all that caffeine is going into like pathological tweeting, things, which is not the same thing. And but also critically, I think taverns were open to everybody, right? And women as well as
Yeah,
men.
they were, well,
The
not
top,
women.
oh, really? Not
Yeah,
in
so it wasn't
taverns?
everybody, but there was. It was a place where classes could mingle. There were not different rooms for different classes as you had in some pubs, but people of any class could mingle, but they were all men. And this was a real problem, and women complained about the coffee houses. There was a wonderful manifesto that women got together to write about how coffee was robbing men of their masculinity, and that the what was it? How'd the line go? There was a very funny line about the only thing stiff was when people got home from the coffee. I forgot what it was,
Yeah, no, I'm very sure that. I can't remember
but
it too, but it was hilarious. Yes, it's obviously women lamenting that caffeine is not exactly going to make their husbands horny.
no, it was, and they were much more interested in one another and their topic of interest, and which is
Some
another difference from alcohol.
some historians have also seen in those coffee houses the beginnings of gay culture. That the Molly houses, they were called Molly houses because some of those coffee houses attracted people of a certain kind, it turned out,
Interesting.
and foppish. They were called Mollies. They had a certain way of looking, and so the out of those coffee houses also came a nascent homosexual community, hidden within the coffee house structure. but even began to acquire a different name, like the Molly House is what they called it.
Fascinating.
So we,
Fascinating.
we think of gays as meeting in bars, but in fact, they started originally kind of
In
met
coffee
each other in
houses.
coffee houses to chat. Um,
You're
and I
right
should,
to think of it as a kind of medium or technology, though, because there were also people who would go from one coffee house to another, spreading information and gossip and rumors. So you had these nodes, but they were networked together, and so they were, in some ways, like the internet of its time.